All right, I think we are live now. Thank you all for your patience. We were having some technical difficulties, but we are here now. You are joining us here at the Book of Muslim hosting a Ramadan 101 webinar. And so our goals here today are twofold: just learning more about Ramadan, what it means, and the whole faith tradition itself. And then secondly, how to support Muslim students on campus during this time. And these skills can be extended to supporting the Muslim community outside of campus as well. I just want to make sure that you can hear us and we are good to go. While we work on that, I am going to tell you a little bit about myself. My name is Maria Ahmed. I am the assistant. What? It says we're not on. Okay, 1 second. Is there the chat is on?
It says we're live.
Yeah, that's what I'm going to say.
Right. Last time I could see like there's people in here.
Yeah, usually you can see the attendees. So that's, I mean.
Right. This one is called.
Hello?
Oops, did I come from? Sorry, in front
Yeah.
Yes. Okay, are we not in it? You don't see us? Yeah. Yeah, that's one. Okay, we are live then. Okay, sorry about that, everybody. We are live. So we will keep going. Usually it does show us that there's people here, but I don't see that information. So sorry about that. As usual, technical issues. So I'm going to introduce our speakers, and then as we go out, I'll see if we can see where we can see how people can enter questions and things like that. So Faizan Mumtaz is here with us. He has been working as a mentor for Muslim youth since the age of 13 through Young Muslims, an organization that works across America. And he has served various leadership roles at the local and national level. He has studied classical Arabic at the Fajr Institute in Cairo, Egypt. And he began his passion for teaching Quranic Arabic in 2007 with Islamic Learning Foundation. He taught summer intensives, conducted private tutoring, and helped design a one-year Quranic Arabic program. He's also served as a full-time instructor for Bayan Institute in Dallas. Has led the strategy for the first ever part-time evening Arabic program designed and taught 2 new traveling courses as well. He currently works as an IT project manager in the Chicagoland area. And we also have Faran Saeed with us, who is a graduate of the Louisiana State University, where he completed his Master of Arts in Higher Education Administration. He received his Bachelor of Science in Biochemistry in 2012 from the University of Memphis. He currently serves as the Director of Community Engagement for Madison House, a nonprofit that's affiliated with the University of Virginia. And his personal time, he does interfaith work on the local and regional level. So thank you both for being here. So just to hear from both of you, Faizan, can you tell us how your fast is going today and a little bit more about yourself that I didn't mention yet?
So far, so good. My fast is going really well, actually. I think weekdays, at least for me, are easier than weekends because I stay really busy in the weekdays. I actually currently work for a university, American Intercontinental University, with headquarters in Schaumburg, Illinois. And so it's an online university, so I'm not in a college campus all day, but I like to think I am kind of mentally. And so it's going pretty well.
Great. And how about you, Faran? How's it going?
It's going really well. Luckily I don't get really hungry during the day, but it's really the getting thirsty for me. So I make sure to hydrate as much as I can before the fast starts. But it's been going really well. It's actually gone really fast. and some more things about me. So I serve as the Muslim Student Association's advisor here at the University of Virginia. Additionally, I do a lot of my research is focused on Muslim identity development, kind of what factors make up a Muslim's identity, and that could be cultural, that could be the geographic one, that could be kind of their kind of landscape that impacts their identity. And so I'm super excited to just be on this call and share my knowledge.
Awesome. Well, thank you for both for being here. And again, I'm sorry for the late start, but we are going to get right into it. So we're hosting this webinar because it is Ramadan. It is a time that a lot of people know about the month of Ramadan. You know, I think we've done a good job of listing on calendars and things like that. But I think there's a lot of details that go into it that are often not talked about, or especially like working in higher education and student affairs, we're kind of in this boat where we are expected to know some things, but I am grateful that a lot of you have signed up to join to kind of learn more about the nuances of the month and how to support our students and colleagues during this time. So we'll start with Faizan to kind of get a more in-depth of what does the Quran and Islam itself tell us about the month, you know, the who, what, where, when, how, whys of Ramadan. And so that will answer some of the questions that people have asked, and we'll get started right there. So
Sure.
I'm gonna go through that.
Yeah, I would be happy to address that. We know that the Quran talks about and addresses so many aspects of the Muslim's life. Some of the most often discussed aspects of the Quran have to do with knowing who God is, knowing our role in life, our purpose in life, the different acts of worship. Muslims engage in very prominent acts of worship, which a lot of people know about. There's the pilgrimage that happens, the Hajj that happens in Mecca. There's fasting in Ramadan. There's prayers. There's a weekly prayer. There's daily prayers. There's charity. There's all these different aspects to our worship. And throughout the entire Quran, which is a large book, like 600 plus pages, the month of Ramadan is actually only mentioned once in the entire Quran. And it's mentioned in the second chapter. And all of the primary rulings of the month of Ramadan are mentioned in that one verse. And the reason I'm mentioning this is because it's mentioned that one time in the Quran, and it's a very prominent part of the life of the Prophet Muhammad, peace and blessings be upon him. But it's just mentioned that one time, and all of these rulings and all of these implementations and all of these practices that 1.5 billion people around the world celebrating this blessed month is coming from that one verse. And it's a few lines long, and it has a different aspects to it. And a lot of the information that I'm going to be presenting today and mentioning is rooted in that one verse. It talks about who should fast. It talks about exemptions of fasting. It talks about greater aspects of the month of Ramadan. Is it just about fasting, or other areas as well? And then I'm going to kind of address some of the other points of fasting, as well as some of the more technical aspects as well. We know that Ramadan is a month-long event that is distinct and unique in many ways. And to me, it's unlike anything else inside any other faith, and it's unique from everything inside of Islam as well. So it's very unique in so many different aspects, and I feel very fortunate to be alive during this blessed month. And I want to kind of take this opportunity to explain you why it's so special, aside from just the act of worship of fasting in that month. One of the reasons that it's really special is that the Prophet Muhammad, peace and blessings be upon him, he told us that the devils are locked up in this month of Ramadan. And to me, that makes it a little bit more special, because every day in and day out, we are in this competitive nature of doing as much good as we possibly can every single day. And one of the things that kind of bogs us down are temptations and whispers from the devil, for example. And it's almost as if like I'm playing a basketball game and the other team is just locked up in the locker room. And it's time for me to take advantage of that time, score as many points as possible. I'm not going to sit down and drink Gatorade, for example. Like, I'm going to maximize that opportunity. Aside from that aspect, it's a month where extra mercy from God is available for humanity, for creation, for the believers. And one of those things is outside the month of Ramadan, whenever we do a good deed, for example, we believe that we get 10 times that reward. That when a person does a good deed, it's written as if they did it 10 times. Inside the month of Ramadan, that multiplication factor is raised by a number that we don't even know. It could be 7, it could be 70, it could be 700, it could be even more. That means that when I do one small good thing, like I'm walking and I see like a piece of garbage or something on the ground, maybe somebody littered, and I go and I pick that up, in my book of deeds, that's going to be written down that I picked up not one piece of litter, but maybe 10 pieces, maybe actually more than 10 pieces, maybe 70 pieces, maybe 700 pieces. And that's just one small thing that I'm doing, and it's multiplied. So for me, it's a really kind of benefit and blessed time to take advantage of maximizing as many good deeds as I possibly can and try to offset the bad deeds that I've committed for the remainder of the year, and even in the month of Ramadan, mistakes that I make. Every kind of career and field has like a very typical season that occurs every year. Accountants have a season where they have like tax season, and they're really busy, and there's all these things happening, and the bulk of their career is taking place like in this is being implemented in this short amount of time. Being a Muslim is a full-time job. And the month of Ramadan is kind of like that busy season where it's not just like one extra thing that you're doing. There's all these other extra aspects to it as well. The first that is the most prominent that most of us have heard about in some manner is fasting. And a lot of times people say the fasting takes place from like sunrise to sunset. And that's true, but it really takes place from like daybreak to sunset. So for example, from the daybreak today in Chicagoland area where I reside is 3:59 a.m. So that's the cutoff point, like the last point where I can eat anything or drink any water. That's the point where I have to abstain from eating and drinking and intimacy with my wife, for example, from 3:59 a.m. till sunset, which is around 8 p.m. And so it's from that daybreak to that sunset. And these are kind of the three things that we abstain from is food, drink, and intimacy. Aside from fasting, the month of Ramadan is also highlighted as the month of the Quran. It was the month in which the Quran revelation actually began over the period of 23 years in that period of time during the life of the Prophet Muhammad, peace and blessings be upon him, from the age 60, from the later part of his life, age of 40 till the age of 63. And so it's also a time for me to reconnect with the Quran. It's a time for me to reconnect with all these other acts of worship aside from just fasting. The Prophet Muhammad, peace and blessings be upon him, he told us that in addition to abstaining from that food and drink and those relations, there's also the aspect of growing those positive qualities of a believer, especially their manners, abstaining from anger, abstaining from backbiting people, insulting people, abstaining from violating somebody's rights, for example. And it could be that a person commits all these bad deeds, talking bad about somebody, insulting somebody, taking somebody's rights away, and maybe they were fasting, like they didn't eat or drink anything all day. And the Prophet Muhammad, peace and blessings be upon him, he remarked that the only thing that this person gained was just hunger and thirst. So there's also this aspect of trying to reform yourself and becoming better in all these other spiritual aspects that the Muslim interacts in. And so it doesn't have to do just with like, I can't just like not eat and drink food and then commit all these other crimes and these like ethical and moral crimes and religious crimes and spiritual crimes. And I think that I'm doing like this great deed of fasting and not eating all day. And so it's kind of part and parcel with abstaining from food and drink is also this aspect of growing those positive qualities of mercy and empathy and the different things that the Prophet Muhammad, peace and blessings be upon him, that he embodied. The verse that I mentioned that occurs in the Quran that mentions the month of Ramadan, it mentions the month of the Quran, it mentions that it is a set period of time. It's the 9th month of the Islamic calendar, which goes in conjunction with the lunar calendar. And it's every year it's either 29 or 30 days. And it basically begins when the new moon is sighted. And there's kind of a difference of opinion in the Muslim community as to whether we can kind of just calculate when that moon will be sighted or whether somebody should physically see that within their region or within the world. And so sometimes Muslims will start, like, for example, on a Sunday, and the other Muslims who follow a different opinion might start on a Monday. And then the same thing would happen at the end of that lunar month when the next month begins, based on their calculation and their methodology of discerning when that new month starts, that it might dictate whether it's going to be 29 days or 30 days. There are definitely exemptions in terms of who participates in the month of Ramadan, specifically with fasting. Everybody's participating and enjoying the blessings of the month of Ramadan. The verse in the Quran specifically mentions if somebody is sick, if somebody is traveling. The Prophet Muhammad, peace and blessings be upon him, he told us about other exemptions. If somebody is nursing, for example, then they can make up those days later on outside of a period of time when they're done nursing. For example, my wife is nursing. She's feeding my younger son. He's 1.5 years. And so she's not fasting during the day, but the days that she's missing, which is all 29 or 30 days this year, she's going to make them up later on after a period of time where she's able to do those days outside the month of Ramadan. If somebody is recently gave birth, for example, and they're in this postpartum stage, then they're not obliged to fast. If they are dependent on a certain type of medicine that would normally break their fast, then they're not obliged. It's not necessary for them to fast. In certain cases, for example, where somebody is not obliged to fast, they can either make up those days later on, and there's certain circumstances where they can pay the food for a needy person and make up some of those fasts as well. If somebody's traveling for any reason, they can make up those fasts in a later period of time. Sometimes people struggle with the fast, and so it's kind of a spiritual growth that happens, and so they might not be able to fast all 29 or 30 days, and they're kind of growing in their spirituality, and so it takes time in that aspect as well. A woman could be on her menstrual cycle, for example, and there's other reasons as well, technical reasons where a person might not be able to fast. And so for me, whenever I encounter a Muslim, I always ask them, like, how's Ramadan going for you, for example, versus asking, like, how's their fast going? Because it could be a situation where they're not fasting, or there could be a reason, and it might be either awkward to explain or difficult to explain, or, maybe a personal reason. And so for me, it's just easier to ask, how Ramadan is going for them. And then you have this kind of positive, great discussion about the different aspects of Ramadan and the things that they're enjoying, the things that they're struggling with. Any celebration or holy aspect of our life always has an act of worship associated with it. And since Ramadan has fasting associated with it, it also has this extra kind of supererogatory voluntary prayer that exists in the month of Ramadan as well. We have the 5 daily prayers, but in the evening time, at nighttime, there's an extra prayer that takes place, and it's voluntary. It takes place after the last night prayer, so somewhere around 9:30, 10 o'clock till about 11:30 or midnight. There is a series of prayers that are taking place in every mosque throughout the entire world, and people can voluntarily go and pray for as little or as much as they like. It's a way for them to implement the spiritual growth that they're experiencing in the month of Ramadan. And so it's it always has this positive atmosphere. And pretty much, even if you're not participating in the prayer, a lot of times kids will go and they're hanging out with their friends. They'll pray a little bit, they'll play a little bit, and sometimes there's programs for the kids as well. And so it's kind of this whole very spiritual atmosphere, kind of like a holiday season type of atmosphere that's occurring throughout different families and different places of worship. And so it's kind of a very special time in regards to that as well. In terms of the end of the month of Ramadan, the next month also begins with the sighting of the moon, and so sometimes there's a discrepancy in terms of based on what your calculation method is, and so there could be people that are beginning the next month on like Monday, and other people are beginning on Tuesday, and the first day of the next month is the mark of the celebration of the end of the month of Ramadan. So it's known as the Eid celebration. And so it's a day that usually Muslims at least try to take off if they can, try to spend time with their families, and it's a good kind of conclusion to this month of Ramadan. And so it could be that I know the day of Eid is coming at the end of this month of Ramadan, but I don't know whether Ramadan is 29 or 30 days yet. I only know at the end of the month. And so it's hard sometimes for me to tell my boss, for example, like, I know I need a day off at the end of this month. I just don't know whether it's Monday or Tuesday. And it's kind of hard to explain. It's not like we're still figuring it out. It's just the observational marker to begin that day doesn't occur till like the day before or 2 days before, depending on how you look at it. And so it's kind of hard to exactly know. And if you're following the calculation method, then the calendar is kind of already set. And so it's kind of easy to accommodate for that from that perspective as well. But again, there's these two kind of different opinions. And so Muslims will kind of adopt whichever one they feel more comfortable with. And so some people might already know the day they need off, whereas other people might not know that yet. And so sometimes it becomes kind of difficult to explain because it's difficult to explain between ourselves even sometimes, and let alone explain somebody who is of a different faith. And so kind of Ramadan has all these interesting aspects to it. And I wanted to just kind of at least touch upon the who, what, when, where, why, how of them as much as I could. And there's other aspects as well. One of the, for me, at least on a personal level, one of the greatest aspects of Ramadan is trying to kind of conquer my temptations and conquer the things that try to bog me down throughout the rest of the year. Because I am abstaining from something that's permissible, food and drink, that's something that's normally permissible throughout the year, throughout the day. But because I'm voluntarily submitting to this act of worship, of abstaining from this permissible thing, it makes it easier for me to abstain from things that are impermissible outside the month of Ramadan. So it's kind of like this spiritual weightlifting and growing into being able to conquer this temptation and these difficulties as much as possible. And I would be happy to touch upon any of these points throughout the Q&A as well.
Awesome. Thank you, Faizan.
Welcome.
So I think our Q&A portal right here is not working, but if you have questions, we're checking our email too. So that's kind of where I'll facilitate the question and answer session. So if you want to send an email to Book of Muslim or contact@bookofmuslim.com, I'll be looking there for questions as we continue. So I'll kind of, to transition to the next part of it, I'm going to answer one of the questions, which was actually asked a couple of times. How do we greet somebody when it's Ramadan, or how do we acknowledge or recognize? And saying Happy Ramadan or Ramadan Mubarak, which just really means, we're wishing you a blessed Ramadan, is completely appropriate, and I think welcomed. It's always nice for me to see that other people know it's happening and they're recognizing it, and value that part of my identity, and letting me know that they see me and are there to see if I need anything during this time. So that's definitely something appropriate to say. And as Faizan mentioned, like, how's your Ramadan going is a great follow-up to that as well. I think Ramadan has always been a time where now the Muslim community really comes back together too. So it's a nice time. We had those night prayers and even like meals when we're breaking fast together. It's a nice time to come together, and also serves as a great time to have these like interfaith conversation and just conversations about faith. So it's a great time to ask those questions and build that relationship with students or colleagues who may be practicing and observing Ramadan. So kind of shifting gears, kind of going into the more of the personal of it. I wonder, like, just, Faran, if you want to start sharing,
Yeah.
What was your intro to Ramadan? How did you, growing up, how was that for you? And how is it now too?
Yeah, so Ramadan for me was something that was kind of like mystical growing up, in the sense of as being a little kid and, not being old enough to fast growing up. So I would see a lot of people fasting, but I was not allowed to until a certain age. And so when I was first introduced to Ramadan, when I was first able to, do small, maybe half-day fast, was when I was 6 years old, when I really pushed my parents to let me do kind of maybe a half day to just see how it was, just because I wanted to feel part of my faith, especially that is a big part. I didn't start doing full fast until I was 7. So 7 until now, I've been doing kind of full day fast, and it's actually helped a lot. And I think with Ramadan and fasting, it's actually helped me set the tone for the rest of the year until the next Ramadan. So like Faizan was talking about habits and being able to kind of building the strength and stuff like that, I've been able to do the same thing. And so read more Quran, be able to go to the mosque and pray more. And so, I've set goals during Ramadan. And so for me, it's like, once Ramadan is over, encourage myself to go to the mosque for prayers every single day, whether maybe one or two, one of the 2 daily prayers at the mosque. So it's been something that has been really good. And, something that's also helped with Ramadan, it's actually helped me make me closer to my family. That is something that we can share together, especially when we open our fast, when we're reading Quran together. And then also being able to share that with my community, in my Muslim community. So the local mosque, having people that are the same age as me, as well as elderly people, being there every night at the mosque, being able to go through what we're going through, has been wonderful. But I definitely say at the very beginning, it was kind of this like mystical, like, my parents are doing it, but I'm not doing it, so I don't really know much about it. But finally being able to do kind of small fast, and then finally be able to do full fast, has been something that I look forward to, and it's the highlight of my my year.
Thank you. Okay, Zad, does that bring up any memories for you?
It definitely does. I think growing up, at least some of my youngest memories of the month of Ramadan don't really have to do with fasting as much as like feasting, for example, because my mother would cook an enormous amount of food, and like Faran was mentioning, it's a good way to reconnect with family. And so we would have extended family and cousins come over, especially on the weekends, and we have kind of these big, when it's time to break our fast, the meal that we call iftar. We would have the kind of these these kind of more elaborate dinners, which I was not used to having during the year. And I thought, well, this is the best time of the year because you get like all those foods that you always wanted, and your mom's cooking not like one, but everybody's favorite dish. And, she's spending all this time in the kitchen, even though she's fasting herself. And so it also kind of shows like how much of a hero the cooks in our lives are, and they're sacrificing this time and this energy to provide this great meal for us, to bring like this great day into kind of a successful and happy conclusion. And it's not even the end of the day. It's the end of the day, beginning of the night. And the night is where a lot of the night worship happens. And for me, again, being able to go to the mosque with my dad when I was younger, and although I didn't participate in the nightly prayer as much, I was playing with my friends and hanging out and creating these awesome memories that are kind of rooted in the month of Ramadan. And so those are kind of like my earliest memories. And similar to how Faran mentioned, of kind of gradually building up to full day fasts. I think the first month where I did not full day fasts, but full day fasts and the entire month of Ramadan, at least that I can remember, I think I was in 9th grade when I did the entire 30 days that I can kind of recall to myself and hold myself accountable to that. And for me, so that's kind of young adolescent type of age. And for me, it was a very kind of powerful experience as kind of you're growing into a man. You're also taking on these responsibilities, and fasting is one of those things that like you can see people, but you can't see them 24 hours a day. You can't see them the whole day. It's easy for a kid, for example, like if I'm fasting, I'm like 6 years old, 7 years old, and it's too difficult for me. If I drink some water, like my mom's not going to know I drank water. Nobody's going to know I drank water. And so it's a great way to kind of build that grit, that willpower. And it's something that you have to kind of commit to it. So at a young age, I decided, okay, well, I'm going to do all 30 days, and my parents aren't forcing me to. Nobody's going to hold me accountable. It's just between me and God. And so it kind of has that very close connection between you and God as well. And so those are kind of my earliest memories with the month of Ramadan.
Yeah, as you all are speaking, like so many things came up to me. I think like every Ramadan has been so different. Even this Ramadan has been very different for me. We have a 4.5-year-old daughter, and so we try to avoid the fried food, which is like one of the traditional foods of Ramadan when we're breaking our fast is a lot of fried things. And we're like, no, we got to be healthy. But I was like, it's tradition. It really I felt like it was missing. And the weekend, and we're like, it's okay, have a cheat day. And so, our daughter helped us make some of the foods, and she didn't eat it all, but it's okay. She it's kind of, letting her know, see, we're all cooking together and it's a special time. And she thinks like, if she doesn't eat for half an hour that she's fasting. So she's fast right now. But kind of hitting on some of the points you all mentioned, like just to talk about it. So iftar was mentioned as a word. That's usually what we use when we're talking about breaking the fast, the meal that we have then. And sahur or sehri would be that meal we have before, in the morning at that 3 a.m. before we start the fast. And there's just different foods that people eat then too. And there's a lot of research too of what, foods would be best to, not make you thirsty throughout the day and keep you sustained. So there's a lot of thought that goes into that as well. And even about the age, I think it's something like, I know I try to get my kid excited about Ramadan and just, having her understand that it's an important part of our lives. But also the obligatory part of it, once you're of age, once you hit puberty, that's when you're more accountable of all the actions that you're doing, whether that's prayer, fasting, choosing to be Muslim, all of that. I think as families, your role to introduce the ideas, and then as individuals, of how you practice. And what Faizan just said of whether our parents know we did it or not, I think I had that opportunity right freshman year of college. So how Ramadan is now coming back into the school academic year. It was the last week. It was the first week of classes, like welcome week stuff. Actually, right before classes was our right when I started college, and it was like that week we have all the free food in the world, and it was hot. It was August. It's like all this ice cream and so many things, and I'm like, I could straight up eat whatever I want. Nobody will know. Like I could just do it. And so I think, like looking back at that was probably my hardest day of fasting. Was the embalmment fair. We have all the food in the world, and it's all right there, like right there. So I think that was definitely like one of the biggest struggles for me. And it started in college, and so we're going to transition now into how can we support Muslim students on campus during this time. So right now, I know on my campus, all our students just left last week. So they're gone. We have some breaks. But graduation was this weekend. It happened during Ramadan, and we'll give some insight and tips on how to kind of navigate that. And I'll start with you, Faran, if you want to give some insight on that.
Yeah, so the first thing I would say is really working with senior administration and dining to, especially if students are still on campus, to provide an opportunity where they have options where they can eat. A lot of times the dining halls are not open before the fast is starting. So again, you're talking about 3, 4 a.m. And then you have after the fast is over, it's probably 8 or 9 dining halls are closed. Something that we've done at the University of Virginia is we've actually worked with the dining where they have prepared suhoor, sari meals for students to come pick up that they can use their kind of dining meal plan for. And so they have that. And they also have made it where the institution has done a kind of a community iftar for the university. And so that way that can opportunity allow other students and faculty and staff to also participate. To just show solidarity for the Muslim students. I would say additionally, some things that you can do is work with the provost office to see if they can have faculty accommodate students' schedules for exams. Ramadan this year has fell on exam season here at the University of Virginia, and so students were allowed to take their exams actually earlier before Ramadan, and or wait until fasting was over to then take the exam, especially if you have students that are doing 18, 19, 20-hour fasts, depending on where you are in the world. So I would definitely say those two things are probably probably the most prominent things that you should be doing. And Mari, if you want to add in anything about that as well, and I can add a couple more things as well.
Yeah, sure. Even with the exams, we kind of, I think it's best practice to, just as we put like maybe in your syllabus, something about if you need accommodations for class, here's the office to see, or like the professor knows. Similarly, if beforehand, there's a clause in the syllabus that if you have a religious observance and you need some accommodation to have that conversation, I think putting that in the syllabus beforehand takes the onus off the student to feel like, hey, I'm feeling like a burden going to a professor and asking for these accommodations, but being proactive in that way. And yeah, so we also had students, we at the Multicultural Center, I let students know if they need that note for verification or whatever to stop by and get that if they need to take their exam, at 8:30 after they can eat a little bit at 8. So that's definitely an easy accommodation to take care of. In my role, I oversee our Multicultural Leadership Awards at work. And so that was definitely something we were looking at. How do we do the awards night where we know a lot of our audience are Muslims in the MSA and so forth, and how do we accommodate it for that? And so this year we got lucky. We did it on like May 1st, and so Ramadan started like May 4th or 5th, and so we missed it, and it was fine. But next year we won't be so lucky. And so what we're thinking about is like, do we just start later? Do we run the program starting at 7 and then open the meal up at 8 or 8:15? As an alternative. And I know other campuses have emailed and said, for graduation receptions, if there's like a school, maybe like School of Engineering, I'm being very stereotypical, but if we know there's a lot of Muslims there who are observing Ramadan, maybe if their family receptions are held later at night, something like that, that can be definitely a way to create that sense of belonging and welcoming that I think we're aiming for our students to have, especially as they're heading out the door.
Yeah. The one more thing I would also add is in terms of the verification, kind of a form of kind of an excuse form, I would say. Something that we've done here is that we've actually partnered with the local masjid, the mosque that's here in Charlottesville, with the Office of Multicultural Affairs and the Office of the Dean of Students to kind of co-sponsor a kind of excuse form that has the branding from the university as well as the mosque that's showing that this is something that's obligatory part of a Muslim student's faith. And so that has helped a lot with the faculty in terms of accommodating not just fasting, but also prayer times as well. So the 5 daily prayers. And so that has worked really well here at the University of Virginia. So if you out there are struggling to see how you can support Muslim students, really find a champion in kind of the senior administration at the university that can be that advocate for the students. A lot of times that's either the provost or kind of the chief diversity officer or someone in the kind of the multicultural affairs, diversity inclusion office that can really serve as the kind of the champion for these students. And then also being proactive. So if you know that Ramadan is coming, and if you're over a multicultural affairs and the MSA or any Muslim student groups that under your thing, that's an opportunity to take a look at it and see if there's some programming that you can do. We've also done kind of dialogue and discussion and brown bag lunches leading up to Ramadan to help educate the Charlottesville UVA community. And then we had, and like I said, we had that community iftar dinner that we did in solidarity. We had about 500 people show up, and majority of those people were non-Muslim people to learn more about Islam. So those are some of the events that I would say can help support students and show solidarity. And then also, we also have a kind of a guide that we've created that's more of things that you can ask, things that you shouldn't ask, or common things that students get, like not even water. And so that has actually helped students that aren't Muslim kind of what are appropriate and what's not appropriate to ask. And that's helped a lot as well.
Can you expand on not even water? What do you mean?
Yeah. So a lot of times people don't realize that you cannot have any liquids as well for Ramadan. And so a lot of times when I'm telling people that I'm fasting and I say abstaining from food, and a lot of times they'll respond back like, not even water? Like, not even water. And so, you'll have people going 16, 18, 17 hours of not abstaining from food, drink, and impotency with their spouse. And so that is a running kind of a meme, I guess I would say, that's in a running joke that's in the Muslim community, that a lot of people ask Muslim students, like, well, not even water. And so that is something, those are a list of things that's in this kind of documentation that, not eating water, not food, so just kind of laying it out them, so that making sure that they're not as surprised.
Yeah, I think so. Somebody's question was, how can we host like a community iftar, but also be respectful of all the traditions? I think just first with all these things, I think working with your Muslim students who are on campus, whether that's through the MSA or just the individual students that who may be active and involved, and you're having these conversations with, kind of touching base with them to see what they need in the community at that time. So we had our MSA, like it was during finals week, the first 3 days of finals, we were able to, reserve the space for them to use as a potluck iftar space. And one of the days we were able to host the iftar, and we kind of let them pick that menu. And if there's not always that option of bringing outside catering or potlucks, working with dining staff to see like if halal meat is not an option, which sometimes that just makes it really expensive, going vegetarian or even pescatarian is a safe way to go. And so that's definitely, you don't have to feel burdened to get halal meat from somewhere and all that. I think vegetarian options, and people are hungry at that time, so it's totally fine. Dates are definitely a staple food, so you can buy those from really anywhere. Now they're everywhere, Whole Foods, Trader Joe's even. And a great way to do a giveaway if you're trying to promote your office would be a water bottle. So you try to be green, and we will use those, because not even water.
Not even water.
Let's see, anything else that comes up that you'll want to touch upon?
I would also say, just for Ramadan, to be wary that that not all Muslims will be part of the Muslim Student Association, and so making sure that students that maybe haven't found a home with the Muslim Student Association, that you're also catching those individuals as well. A lot of times, especially at the University of Virginia, we just assume that if you're in that all Muslims are in the MSA, and that's not necessarily the case. And so being wary that you take that into account to whatever programming that you're going to be doing, as well as kind of the messaging for campus.
Yeah. And also, as we talk about kind of like the celebrations, sometimes, and really, I would say this is best practice for any event that you're doing, is if you're building your spaces and already have a designated prayer or meditation space, is allowing for that as well. So many times I attended awards nights where I'm like, oh, I need to pray now. But there's no designated space. But if you're especially focusing on Ramadan and Iftar, it's crucial to not overlook the prayer space area. So sunset, which marks the time for when you can open your fast or break your fast, is also a time for one of the 5 prayers. So that's definitely just having an open space. There's no need for chairs or really anything, just an open space where people can stand and bow and kneel. It would be important as well. So, planning for the iftar on campus, timing, always sunset, it's quite late in most parts of the U.S. So if you're, I know on the West Coast, it's very late, like 8:45 almost. Here in like the Midwest, we have it at like 8:15. So sometimes for programming wise, maybe you start the programming earlier, as I mentioned, and then you're closing off with the meal and letting that be a social time. So you're not going too late into the night. And yep, I kind of think I hit on some of that on the question that we got just now. Do either of you have experiences you want to share if you had Ramadan during your college time? Any experiences with that?
Yeah, I think for me, the experience in my college, same time with Maria, I think I really relied on one, making sure my professors and the people around me knew why I was fasting. I think that really helped with me, and then really staying busy with my school and the reading Quran really helped me stay focused and avoid the temptations of food that was, the first week of school. And then I really relied on kind of the senior administration for like support. And so it's so long ago that I remember being in college, but I remember really relying on other Muslims and being around them during that time. So then knowing that they're going through the same thing to be more productive. So, if we're fasting 16-hour days, I'd be around a lot of Muslim people, and we'd be just sitting in the same room studying, knowing that like I don't have to be around food. The individuals around me get what I'm doing, and so for me, I really focus on being around community and building that.
Same here for me. I think just having that support group and that network was very positive, and I was fortunate that most of my teachers had experience with a student that was participating or observing the month of Ramadan, and so a lot of them, I was a little bit shy. They would actually reach out to me, and that kind of gave me the confidence to speak out in case I needed help accommodating for like an exam or something like that with the teachers. It kind of gave me the confidence I needed when an instructor kind of reached out to me themselves. It just kind of gave me that push and confidence, which I greatly appreciated.
Awesome. And so as we're getting towards the end of the webinar, if we were getting towards the end of Ramadan itself, we will have Eid, as Faizan kind of mentioned, as a celebration that is really the start of the next lunar month. But that is definitely a way to also recognize your Muslim students and support them by having some kind of get together. That's also, for me, very like time for family and friends to get together and tradition. And sometimes when you're away from that, it can be very lonely. So if campus is able to, host something or even just recognize, right? I think a lot of it goes into the communication and messaging we're doing around these holidays. Are we even, acknowledging it? Is that in a newsletter that the Dean of Students sends out, or, any kind of weekly communication? Is that even if it's a tweet or something? I think that can go a long way as well. Kind of have Faizan mentioned, if somebody else is reaching out, it gives them that confidence to kind of share more or ask for those accommodations of what's needed. So going off of Eid, Faizan, can you give us a little more insight on like what Eid is and how maybe Faran, you can go into something could happen on campus for Eid as well?
Sure. What I really enjoy about Eid, especially kind of inherently as a part of the lunar calendar, is that unlike other holidays that are kind of fixed points in time, whereas like Christmas, for example, always the last week, December 25th, or Valentine's Day, kind of more secular holiday, happens like the same date every year, then the lunar calendar actually shifts like about 10 days earlier every single year. So whereas the month of Ramadan kind of began in the early part of May, next year it might start like 10 days earlier, which means that the day of Eid, this celebration, will actually shift about 10 days earlier every year. And so for me, just inherently, I get to experience this holiday in all seasons throughout my lifetime. So since it shifts about 10 days every year, I get to see what Eid is like in the winter. I get to see what it's like in the summer. I get to see what it's like in the spring. Over the course of my entire lifetime, a few times it's going to go through the entire year. And it's really just a day of celebration and a day of, it has also one additional prayer in it as well as a part of the celebration. But there is no fasting. It's actually impermissible to fast on the day of Eid. And so it is a day for you to literally break your fast and break bread with your family, your friends. It's a great way to connect with neighbors as well. A lot of my family will either invite some of our neighbors over, or we'll send them a meal, or we'll kind of use it as a good platform to exchange and have communication about. We just celebrated the month of Ramadan, and now we're having Eid. And this is, for Muslims, we only have these two holidays that happen every year. They're both called Eid. The first one happens at the end of Ramadan, and the other one happens a few months later during the Hajj season. And so this is the time for us to really celebrate, to make it the most. And for me, I have two kids, and my older son is 5 years old, and he's seen other holidays and other cultures and other religions and how they celebrate it. And I want to make sure that Eid is so special to us that he understands that I can make it as kind of happy and enjoyable for him as possible, so that he understands that this is my holiday and this is a day for me to celebrate and to enjoy. And so it's usually just spending time with family. Definitely there's an exchange of gifts that takes place. And especially when you're younger and your parents are giving you like money and things like that, and you're like, oh, what am I going to buy? And especially when you're really young, you're like, I can finally buy like all the hot Cheetos that I want, and this and that. There's money involved, there's gifts involved, and so now I'm at the point where I'm trying to figure out, well, what gift do I get? I want to give my son, my friends, my brothers, my colleagues, my neighbors, so that it's as impactful and meaningful as possible. And so there's a little bit of planning that happens, and it's tough actually in the month of Ramadan, planning for Eid and trying to get everything ready, because you're just so consumed with all the worship and everything that's happening in Ramadan. You don't really get time to kind of plan for Eid, but that's also kind of a big part of Ramadan, and especially the last 10 days of Ramadan, where we're emphasized to kind of worship even more, and especially the night prayer is emphasized. And so it's early to get your Eid shopping done kind of way in advance, or Amazon is your friend in that manner. You just order online, ship it to the person if you can. And so sometimes that helps as well. And so it's just a really good ambiance and really great environment for exchange of like happiness and interaction with friends and family.
I would say that something that you can do in celebration, if you're a college administrator, is thank you cards, or just something that we do that has happened to me while in college, was whether you're the office or your administrators or your friends have just gave me a thank you card, and that goes a long way. Just recognizing that it's your faith. I would refrain from going big and above, but a simple kind of handwritten note and a thank you and congratulations goes a long way. And so I would, if you were to do something to just celebrate your Muslim student that's celebrating Eid and they're on a college campus, I would stay small and really just do a kind of a thank you and congratulations for completing Ramadan.
Awesome. Well, thank you both. There doesn't seem to be any more questions. So thank you both, and also thank you to our audience. As you can see, there's definitely a lot of work to be done, and maybe we can do something again next year, so we can do a little refresher before Ramadan starts, and it'll be more into the academic year. And so if you have questions between now and next year, you feel free to ask us in the meantime. But asking questions and just checking in is so important. I think everybody who signed up today and who's asked questions, I think that it shows how willing we are to not just do this for accommodation's sake, but just to learn and be aware of what our students are going through, what our neighbors and our community is going through, and really like billions of people in the world are. So thank you for that and being here. We'll be creating some more documents and just material to send out on different ways to support Muslims during this time on campus and your communities at large, not only in Ramadan, but also just to build capacity of supporting Muslim students at all times, and just also being there for your neighbors across the board. So I'll give you both a minute if there's anything else you want to close out with, and then we'll just wrap it up.
Well, I just wanted to thank Book a Muslim and Maria and Faran and actually all the attendees for kind of making this event possible. And I think that, as Maria mentioned, I'm very grateful for the attendees taking out their time to try to learn about a faith that they might not adhere to or follow, but to learn what people are going through and to kind of have that demeanor and that attitude towards learning and towards knowledge. I think that's very commendable, and I really appreciate that. And then also, I really appreciate, Faran, you talking about the different aspects of implementing and adopting and accommodating for Muslims in a college environment. I actually took some notes. I really benefited from that. So thank you so much.
No, thank you. Again, I also want to thank Book a Muslim, Faizan, Maria for having me on here, and also the attendees for taking time out of your schedules to listen to us. I know that it's a busy time of the year for a lot of people. And then I also just leave is that continue learning about Islam, learn about different faiths. I think the best way to do that is if you can visit your local mosque and really help understand kind of what Islam is and who Muslims are. And so, again, if you have any other questions, please reach out to Maria through Book a Muslim, and we'll be happy to answer any other questions.
All right. Well, thank you both, and thank you all. We'll see you next
All
time.
right.
Bye.
Bye.
Take care.